welcome to the show. I'm V. LaBianca.
I'm Eric Murphy.
This is Skeptic Generation.
And we need to talk.
This is episode 14, season 1. They're coming into you live 8/22/21. It's the day before my birthday.
It is.
Yeah.
Early happy birthday.
Thank you. I've been seeing people saying happy birthday in the chat. Thank you guys so much. That means a lot to hear. I'm going to be 28.
Yeah.
So catching up to you. That's how that works, right?
A little bit at a time. Yeah. I can stay 34 for a while.
Cool. All right. So we just got back from a trip to Baltimore.
We did. And it was really, really fun.
It was amazing. It was a really good trip. I got to show Eric my hometown of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. We walked around. We got to try some amazing seafood. If you've been following my Twitter, that's all I've been talking about for the last 3 days.
Yeah. There's some real good oysters out there.
Oh, yeah.
And just, I don't know, for people who haven't visited the East Coast, seeing steam coming up from the sewers in the middle of the street.
You have not been able to get over that.
It's so cool. And then, I mean, I'm from the West Coast where we have earthquakes. And so really, really tall buildings made of brick are not a thing because that just would not work, when the ground shifts.
Yeah.
And so getting to see that, we stayed up on the 10th floor of a hotel. That's where they put us. We did not have to pay extra for that, which was neat, but...
The downside is that the second night we got back around like 10, 11 p.m. And they flag us down at the front and they're like, I'm so sorry, the elevator is out.
What room are you in? we're on the 10th floor. They're like,
they're like, well, he'll be the person who will fix it will be here in like an hour.
Yeah,
and we're like,
how long is that going to? Yeah, so we scaled 10 floors. I think you tweeted a picture of that, didn't you?
I did. It was intimidating. Eric fell at one point, legitimately fell. If the railing had been a little less sturdy, you would have been
gone ass over tea kettle the whole way down.
Yeah, it would have been bad. But other than that, it was amazing. It was a lovely trip.
Other than
almost dying,
it was actually really fun. For people who don't follow on Twitter, we've never actually given out we've told people to follow us at Skeptic Show on Twitter, and if you're not, you should definitely follow at Skeptic Show because V posts all kinds of really cool stuff. I do other things.
I'm very active. Eric, not so much, but we went to a couple different restaurants where he actually asked, do you have a Twitter so that I can tweet at you how good this is?
That was fun.
If you're doing something right, even Eric will want to tweet about it.
Yeah. So if you want to follow V at Author of Confusion,
Author Confusion,
sorry, at Author Confusion. Yeah. You can see a whole lot more if you want to see my every once in a while tweets. I'm at Dirty Heathen.
No surprises there.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is.
So we are going to jump in. Please do remember that if you would like to ask us questions but don't want to get on the phone, we are monetized. We can accept super chats, and we make sure to read all of them at the end of the episode and answer your questions there. So feel free to ask questions in super chats and stick around to the end of the episode to hear those answered. If you do want to talk to us, and you should want to talk to us, we're fine, we're cool. Then give us a call at 585-526-8774, or if you want to call using your computer, you can use tiny.cc/callsg.
Capital S, capital G. For some reason, that's important.
Yeah. We do have a caller on the line now that I'm excited to talk to again.
Yeah.
Let's talk with Torben in Arizona.
Hi, Torben.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear us?
Hi. I can, and in fact, I don't know if you can tell my voice is, I've got puberty voice right now.
Hey!
Congrats. That's actually really exciting, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, also happy birthday to V. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. What are you calling about today, Torben?
Yeah, so a couple weeks ago, there was a call about vaccine hesitancy.
Yeah.
And I've been on a rotation in medical school on internal medicine, and so I've been in the ICU and on the floor seeing a lot of patients, and I had the honor of attending a journal club with a bunch of the attending physicians at this hospital. And for people who don't know what a journal club is, it's where you have a bunch of doctors in a room. They bring up articles research about like current medical things, and then they all essentially debate how to use this information in practice to make everything better. And I just learned some lessons about the current situation, and it's kind of mind-blowing, the perspective that I've learned about all of it.
Yeah.
Interesting. You want to share the Cliff Notes version with us?
Yeah, so medicine is very dynamic. I feel like a lot of people, when they think about becoming sick and going to the hospital, that they're just going to get some medicine and be sent on their way, like they'll just get better and go. That's not at all how this works. So when we're treating somebody, especially somebody who's very, very sick in the ICU, there's a lot of things you can do, but everything that you alter, you are messing something else up in the process. And one of these decisions that we have to make for you is, do you get to breathe or do you get to eat? Because
oh gosh,
you basically get to choose one or the other. So, and I can explain why this happens. So if you're on high flow oxygen because your lungs aren't working very well, you're at high risk for aspirating. So if you were to eat something, you're very high risk of choking on it. And then if you do that, you can get a bacterial infection on top of the viral infection you already have. So they've just been deciding to make people NPO, so they can't eat anything. Because even if you gave someone a tube to feed them, you still have risk of aspirating. So they just decided don't feed them. But then the debate comes up: do we feed you through your IV, like peripherally? And we can't do that either because you're hypercoagulable. So if we give you food in your IV, you're probably going to throw a blood clot, and you might die.
Jeez.
So this sounds like there's a good reason to try and avoid needing to be on a ventilator.
Yeah, and even they're starting to have these conversations now where how early do we talk to people about their DNR status or their, like, what resuscitation efforts they want. They're saying that we should start talking to people about this as soon as they hit the emergency department.
Wow. Damn. Is that because things take as like quick turns and there might not be time later?
Yeah. If they're saying that if you spend about 10 days in the ICU or in critical care, if we can't like fix you within 10 days, there's like almost no chance that you're going to make it through.
Wow. That's intense. So, Torben, I see you're talking, you want to talk specifically around like vaccine hesitancy here. And I know that I probably know where you're going with this. Can you draw that line for us, connect those dots?
Yeah. For people who are scared of the vaccine, you really shouldn't be. And again, we're not talking about people who have a reason not to get it. But for real, if you're thinking that going to the hospital and getting medication and all this is a safer option than just getting a vaccine, you're absolutely wrong. Like, these debates are happening all the time of how we're going to treat you, what we're going to do about it, and it's very risky. No matter what we do, it's very, very risky. So I think you should get a vaccine. Like, that's way, like, it's the lesser of two evils for sure.
Yeah, even if you want to frame it in that way, like maybe you don't trust the vaccine, maybe you are worried about side effects. If you weight the concerns around both, that makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, I mean,
I honestly, I'm just kind of taken aback personally. I'm listening, but at the same time, about a week and a half ago, I lost my uncle to COVID, and having seen the pushback against getting vaccinated, there are a couple of things that I don't think people are getting. And just to be super, super clear, Torben, can I ask you a couple basic questions about the vaccine? Maybe you can help at least clear up a few of these. Okay. Are there microchips in the vaccine? Maybe like little nanobots that track you?
No.
Are you sure?
Not. Yeah, I'm pretty positive on that.
Okay. What about like, is it made entirely of baby fetus, or only partially
No.
out of fetus?
No.
No? Any
Just
of
partially.
it?
Just kidding. No, none of it. No baby fetus.
Are you sure?
No.
Because that seems to be a thing that's going around that people don't freaking seem to understand. Are you sure? Or we're not killing babies?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Do you get it directly from the Bill Gates Foundation? Or
No.
is there like a supplier between you and the Bill Gates Foundation?
No,
No?
we don't.
Okay.
We don't get it there.
So do you visibly see the mark of the beast after you're vaccinated, like 666 on your arm, or does it show up elsewhere? How does that work?
It depends. It depends on how many shrooms you do first.
But this idea that there's a mark of the beast or something, for some reason, that's something that it is so on its face stupid, and there are so many people who go, oh, well, that's just like your personal view of the world, and, you know, I really don't want to interact or be bothered to tell you that, hey, what you're believing, what you're espousing is not just stupid. It is incredibly stupid, but it's also dangerous.
So incredibly.
It's also damaging or potentially damaging for other people around you. And that makes it incredibly selfish. So for those of you who are watching who can get vaccinated and are choosing not to, you should call in and give us a good reason why, because if you have the ability to get vaccinated and you don't, we want to talk to you. Let's not just hammer at a straw man. Maybe somebody can call in and tell me a good reason why they're choosing not to get vaccinated when they can.
Also, I noticed some people are talking, well, the people who are anti-vaxxers don't watch this show. And you'd be surprised. I guarantee you at least some of the people watching this show are. But also, the reason that we do this show across the board, not just with this topic, is to give you guys talking points for when you have these conversations in your real life, right? Because we're not going to be able to interact with everybody, but hopefully the goal is to promote a way of talking about these things that is actually helpful and useful. Having awesome people like Torben call in with his medical expertise.
Absolutely.
Will hopefully help you take this information to somebody in your life who might be anti-vax.
And just if we're worried about this getting out to people, especially if you're watching this live or if you're seeing this as a clip throughout the week, hit that thumbs up button. Like, subscribe, share this video out. That's what the algorithm looks for, to promote it, to get it in front of more eyeballs. And so that helps. It's a way that you don't have to, talk to your family about it, but potentially help in the long run.
Yeah. Torben,
can I share a point before I go?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so one last thing. I know you've all been hearing ad nauseum about how the ICUs are being full, and I'm sure it's not very tangible to most people, like what that means. But there's a big difference between having a bed in the ICU versus having a bed on the floor. So in the ICU, the doors and the walls are they're clear, so you can be seen. You can easily be monitored. The nurse's station is very close by. Doctors are very close. So if something were to happen in the ICU, if you were to go into cardiac arrest, people can get there. Their response time is pretty good. Mm-hmm. You have a good chance of survival. But let's say the ICU is full. We have to move critical patients onto the floor. We don't have clear doors or walls. No one can see you. You're behind a wooden barrier. Mm-hmm. The nurses are farther away. There's more patients per nurse. More patients per doctor, so you're not as likely to get a rapid response if you were to code on the floor. So it is a life-saving thing to have ICU beds available. And so let's imagine even if you weren't in for a certain viral infection, if you had some other issue, like if you had a heart attack and you coded on the floor, but you should have been in the ICU, you might not make it.
Yeah.
And that's reality. So I did want to pass that on as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. There was a person I follow online whose wife has stage 4 cancer, and she could not get the recommended amount of treatment for her cancer. They had to send her home because they needed all the resources and staff and beds for people with COVID. So this is something that is like the fact that people are not more freaked out about that particular part of it, like leaving COVID and its seriousness aside, the fact that there are no resources for people, regardless of what that issue might be, is terrifying.
Yeah. We actually had someone in the live chat put something relevant. They said, I've been a nurse for 30 years. I work in a facility with a COVID-19 unit. Get vaccinated. In 16 months, over 40 deaths from COVID, 0 from the flu. I'm assuming that that's talking about their hospital specifically.
Yeah.
40 deaths from COVID, 0 from the flu. Yes, this is just this one example. But if somebody says it's just the flu, that's a statistic. One other thing, Torben.
Yep.
What's with the cow dewormer?
Oh God, yeah. Should we all be ingesting ivermectin?
No. Oh my God, no.
Okay. Well, I mean, what are people getting out of it? Why? Why do they think they're doing like what the hell is going on?
I have no clue. And honestly, like any of these treatments, even if we found something that would help manage you in the hospital, like it's way more dynamic. Like I was saying, it's going to throw other things into a weird balance, and so just don't do it. Like we have the easiest method available to avoid all this, and that's just don't get COVID. And there's a vaccine that will help you not get COVID.
Yeah.
Definitely. There's also a video that I helped Holy Kool-Aid with a few weeks ago that goes over those statistics. And so if people want to check that out as well, I think that could be a good resource.
Absolutely. We'll link that in the description for this clip for sure.
Okay.
Awesome. Torben, thank you so much for calling in. I personally love when you call in with this kind of stuff because we want to talk about, the traditional call-in show topics, but there is so much more that we should be focusing on, especially right now. This is prescient, this is important, and I really appreciate you calling in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Did you know that Jordan Peterson is flirting with the idea that maybe ivermectin isn't as bad as the scientists say?
Honestly, it blows my mind.
It doesn't blow my mind. I saw that today. I was like, this is the least surprising thing I have seen on Twitter in a long time.
I've honestly needed to step back because after my uncle died, I've been so angry.
Yeah.
And unable to calm down for a lot. So I've just needed to kind of step away simply because it's gotten into my dreams. It's just not great.
Yeah. We're going to move on to the next caller. I think we're going to be talking about something close to me. But first, I do want to make sure that you know where to get in touch with us. If you want to give us a call at 585-526-8774 or tiny.cc/call-SG, capital S, capital G.
That's right. We have several people who we are hoping are going to call us back because we have some really, really awesome conversations on the line. And we've got room for callers. So if you've been waiting or you're ready for that next conversation, now is the time. Give us a call.
Absolutely. All right. Let's talk with Sky in Colorado. Colorado Sky.
Right.
Hello, Sky. Welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. It's so great to talk to you guys again.
You too.
Happy early birthday.
Appreciate it. Thank you. What can we help you with today? What are your thoughts?
So I have been deconstructing a lot recently, and right now I'm kind of trying to look at homeschooling because I was homeschooled my entire life, and I'm trying to look at it skeptically, and I was kind of trying to get your guys' opinion on it. My experience is very mixed, and I do realize that my experience is also that of an evangelical homeschooler, and that is not everybody's.
Right.
It is a majority in my understanding. But seeing is it a net positive, a net negative, and how do I go about looking at that? Do I look at studies? Do I look at my own experience and other people around me? And what are your thoughts, and how did you think about it?
Yeah, that is a really great conversation topic. And as a fellow lifelong evangelical homeschooled kid, I feel your pain. I see you. You are not alone. Yeah, so homeschooling is a bit of a tricky topic because you think you're being so tricky. It's no sneaky, but your chair just went into the screen. Sorry, Sky. Eric sneakily got up, but didn't so sneakily get up. So homeschooling can be tricky because there is a small subset that do it for, I don't want to say the right reasons, but reasons that are understandable and, justifiable, right? Maybe their school district is horrible and they actually have the resources to train their children better outside of that school. Maybe their child is neurodivergent in some way and they don't have access to like a special ed class or something. And so they need to make sure that their kid is safe and, taught in a way that works for them. In those cases, I think homeschooling can be a viable option, but in those cases, I think that it needs to operate within a structure, right? And we need to make sure that people are being monitored in terms of what they're teaching, that regular testing is happening so that people can, make sure that these kids are getting the adequate education that they need throughout their educational life. Which is something that I had the benefit of growing up in Pennsylvania. They did have an evaluator come in every year and talk with us and ask us how things were going and review some of our homework. And then we also had to take standardized testing specifically for homeschooled kids to make sure that we were very, methodically hitting those benchmarks. So it was very helpful to make sure that my mom had that support and that structure and that feedback, and also protected us from ever being taken advantage of in that way, or, having that education be too lax, or maybe, didn't do a great job with the whole creationism bit. But other than that, I think I got the kind of education that at least got me where I am today. The issue is that a lot of the homeschooling community, possibly most of it, is basically, it's tied very closely with evangelical Christianity. And it also is tied very closely with this distrust of the government, this very super fundamentalist, super conservative movement that, absent anything informing that worldview, can become very damaging, very dangerous, and very cult-like very quickly. So there is the concern that the pushback against regulation, the pushback against supervision, ultimately ends up with kids being abused at worst, right? Or even at best, just miseducated to the point where they are put at a significant disadvantage when they do try to do something like get a job or go to college or even, study for the GED and get an actual degree, right? Like, there are a lot of issues when you take away or push back against the regulation component and the supervision component. With them, I absolutely think we could make it work. It could be a viable option. But the majority of the conversation that we've had, at least so far as a country, seems to be around my freedoms, which isn't a good argument, frankly. So I don't know. That's the kind of overview that I've gathered after looking at it for a couple of years. Sky, what do you think?
Yeah, that's really close to what I'm coming towards. Is like my experience. I also was had standardized tests to make sure that I was keeping on, and like I want to just say, like, for the record, my mom did a really good job homeschooling me. Like, for example, I graduated college at 19 with a bachelor degree because I was homeschooled, and that was the only way I would have been able to do that. And that's a really big advantage for me, and I know that. But at the same time, I wasn't taught evolution. I wasn't taught history in the right way. Yeah. The way that it actually is in reality versus what a lot of white evangelical Christians think it is.
Right.
you know, and it's hard for me to look back at it and go like, oh yeah, that was totally, like, my mom should totally have done that, versus, oh no, you know, like, look at all these disadvantages I was put at. And like, there is something to be said. One of the big things about homeschooling that people bring up a lot is like the social aspect of it. Like, how are these kids ever going to get socialized?
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna bring up. Yeah.
Yeah. There are ways to do it that are really good at socializing and stuff. Like, I was a part of a lot of clubs growing up. But then in my teens, I was isolated. So there is a way to do it both ways, you know.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's...
Well, that's amazing. I mean, I went to public school, and my experience there is just not great. And so I have, you know, a lot of things that I see in homeschool, and especially a lot of the people who've reached out haven't reached out because they had great experiences. You know, people who've reached out to me, at least, have wanted to share about how they went the first 18 years of their life without getting, you know, allowed to open a book, or were given a book, the good book. You know, and so talking about regulation, totally understood. We had someone in the live chat, Ken, who says, I homeschooled my 3 children for 6 years. 2 are now doctors, and 1 is an accountant. You know, and so that just like shows the disparity.
You just the way you phrase that made it sound like the doctors are fine, but like, wow, someone's
an accountant.
An accountant.
Well, okay,
wow.
so to be honest, like, I got a lot of respect for accountants. I do.
Oh yeah.
You want to be a doctor because you want to save lives and all of this, right? If you're an accountant, either A, you couldn't pick a major, or B, you really love math. And if you really love math, I'm so glad you exist. So cheers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different considerations, and the biggest thing I think that I can say to somebody who maybe is thinking about homeschooling their kids, or is worried about maybe children in their life who are being homeschooled, is, are the parents doing it well, right? Homeschooling is a tool to use, and I've used this example for a bunch of different things. People have asked me, is SEO ethical, right? Or is are these concepts, these constructs that we create, is it inherently moral or immoral? And they're not either, right? They're tools. It's an amoral thing to school your child at home. You can do it really well. And if you can do it really well and make sure that they have access to, social engagement and education and support from a larger network, great. That's awesome. You do you. That might be how your child learns best. But if you use it in a way to get away with things that we have proven help children, right? If you're using it to get away from exposing your children to other worldviews, or having them be educated in actual history and science, or even educating them at all, because I know a lot of homeschoolers, especially in the world that I grew up in, homeschooled their daughters specifically because they didn't expect them to go to college at all. And the homeschooling was home economics, right? It was, how do you cook a meal? How do you, manage a household, mend clothing, right? And that was what they were taught, because of a very restrictive and abusive worldview that they were not being called on, because they had essentially closed off from the rest of the world. So it's very dangerous if used incorrectly. It absolutely is. And in those instances, it should be called out. But I think that a lot of the people, especially people who, like us, Sky, may have been personally harmed by homeschooling, we do ourselves a disservice if we lump all homeschooling under that one umbrella and say it's all bad always. So as always, I think that nuance and that understanding that there are some people for whom it is a really good choice and who are doing it correctly. As long as we understand that and make space for that, I think speaking out against it when it is harmful is very important.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys letting me talk about this. This is something I could go on and on about forever, I think.
I'm glad y'all had the conversation. I feel like there's really not much that I can add, but hopefully that, we're grateful to you.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a conversation that I think we should continue. Sky, are you part of the Skeptic Generation Facebook group or Discord or anywhere where you can continue to have these important conversations?
Yeah, I'm a part of your guys' Discord.
Awesome. Good. Well, guys, if you have questions for Sky or if you want to talk about this, or I'm seeing a lot of empathy and a lot of engagement in the live chat right now, feel free to go over there and actually continue this, because this is something that I think should be talked about more.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk about it more. Thank you guys for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sky.
Y'all have...
Yeah. It's weird. And here's the difficult thing for me when talking about homeschooling is similar to Sky. I think that my mom did as good of a job as she could do with the tools and resources and worldview that she had, right? She was invested, and this was her whole life, and she was invested in doing it correctly. Mm-hmm. The issue is, absent a larger access to a framework and worldviews and understanding of the world, what that correct might be is very different from what would have been correct, actually.
Yeah.
Right. So my mom, I've had this conversation with her multiple times where we will talk about, the science, the way she teaches science to my younger siblings and the way that they are learning about it. And she is aware that I disagree with her, and she stands by it because in her mind, that is accurate. And so it becomes this echo chamber. If you are not allowing other voices in and actually considering it, you might be doing the best you absolutely can, unimpeachably, well-intentioned, and still be causing harm. And that understanding and that kind of insight into oneself is a lot to ask for every single homeschooled parent, which is why we have the structures in place that we do.
I entirely agree. It makes me think of when you make a photocopy of something that's already a facsimile. When there's that splotch or whatever in that facsimile, you can't copy that out. And so you wind up perpetuating biases that you may not be directly teaching, but you're absolutely right. That's just kind of where you're at. I know that I did not have huge science fans in my parents when I was growing up, but I did have one science teacher who loved science, and I will never, ever forget him. And I will never, ever forget what I learned in his class, just because, that passion was infectious, and you can't get that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, and I've talked about this before, and I think Adam, the atheist, was the one who brought this up when he was doing, I think, an interview with Phil Ferguson, that Another example of this, and I'll move on after this, but this is important, I think. Another example of that kind of facsimile getting introduced into future versions without realizing it because they're just copying it out. My science background was very limited and very not fun. I hated science, but the reason I hated science is because the way that the creationist textbooks that my parents were just like, oh, this is accurate, this is good, we can just give them these. They don't realize that what those textbooks were doing was purposefully making science incomprehensible and
boring.
Not fun and boring and essentially just math all over again, to discourage people from getting interested in it and digging deeper. So I think that I personally could have been extremely interested in science.
Yeah.
It was squashed so early on because it was presented as something that was just, math 2.0.
So one of the conversations that we had that really kind of blew my mind with you is as an adult, I think one of the coolest little facts I'd ever heard was that Pythagoras was a cult leader. And so if you are studying math and you go over the Pythagorean theorem, that Pythagoras had a math cult.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy crap, I need to tell V this. And I tell V, and you're just like, yeah, of course. I know that.
I knew that.
I was taught that in school. Or I was taught that, while I was growing up. Who learns about the math cult? And why? What is the motivation for that?
Right. It was presented as a way that math could be used antithetical to Christianity, essentially, which is weird that I got this factoid years and years before you did. But in the context of, look at these evil mathematicians.
Yeah. And isn't that just setting the groundwork for bias in the future? And it's amazing. And so that kind of thing, if you are needing to indoctrinate your children or prevent them from learning about other things, because it's wild. But anyway, that's a topic for another day.
We had someone on the line, but I think we may have lost them. So there are a couple people being screened right now.
Yes, Allison and Salvatore in particular had called in with some really great topics.
Yeah, here's hoping that it's just a strange day and not a glitch, because that would be sad.
But in the meantime,
I'm the host. You're the co-host. You have to vamp this time.
Okay. Why would we vamp?
Because we do have somebody on the line.
Yeah, we got a couple.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
Ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All
Trenton in California. Trenton, welcome to the show.
Hi. How are you guys doing? Happy birthday, V.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We're doing good. We're excited to talk to you. You've got some vaccine microchip information for us, huh?
I'm so excited about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, Trenton, you
Yes.
You are microchipped.
Yes, I am.
Ooh.
Not from the vaccine.
Aww.
I got it at DEF CON a few years ago.
At what?
So, at DEF CON, it's a cybersecurity hacker conference they do in Vegas every year.
Oh, that's so nerdy. I love it.
Yeah, I work in cybersecurity, so I was like, it might be interesting to call to explain what it actually is versus what people think is in the vaccine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what it is, the one that I have is actually kind of cool. It has two different chips in it. One is RFID, which is kind of like your hotel room key, a really simple information, and then the other side of it is a NFC tag, which is kind of like an amiibo. That's the example. So
interesting.
It holds very little data. We're talking kilobytes, and it has no power at all. It's powered from the actual reader, whether it's an NFC or RFID reader.
Okay.
So it can't broadcast information. It doesn't have Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or anything cool like that. And it's relatively big. I would say mine is almost an inch long.
Whoa.
Maybe half an inch. I might be overshooting it, but it's pretty thick. It's like a grain of rice.
Wow.
Okay, so
getting that injected.
I've
not.
I'm so like, but the anti-vaxxers are saying that it's like a Fitbit. Like they can track your sleep and your GPS location. How big would you need, that injection to get all that technology in there? Like, what would the logistics of that even look like?
So I have seen a guy, I can't recall what his name is. He put a Raspberry Pi as an implant.
Okay.
I don't know if, so a Raspberry Pi is kind of like a really small computer. It's probably like, 3 inches by 2 inches.
Wow.
Sometimes
roughly that, maybe a little bit bigger. It's huge. He had to get it surgically implanted, and it looks disgusting.
Oh God.
I mean, it's not an injection. It's a full on
like a subdermal
like cutting. Yeah, and it's big. It looks gross. It's like this huge rectangle sticking out of his arm. That would give you Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. Now,
okay.
And then you got to figure out how you would power that, because that doesn't include the power. So you'd have to power it through that.
Wow.
And now when I got the vaccine, I got the Moderna shot, I remember thinking like, man, that's a really, really tiny needle.
Yeah.
And then once people started saying that, oh, there's a microchip in it, I just thought it was hilarious because of how big the needle was when I got a microchip. It's barely even fair to call it a needle. It looks like a pipe. It's just sharpened.
Oh
my gosh.
Oh God. Oh no.
Are you okay?
I'm a little nauseous, to be honest.
Eric's got a thing about needles, so this is a fun conversation for him.
No. We need to have this conversation. We're going in.
Yeah. That's incredible. That is a very, like, this is the thing that's so annoying to me about these conspiracy theories is just talk to a single person with this actual concrete information. It is not big enough to do what you are saying that it is doing. Like, physically, this is impossible. Even if we were to grant that somebody wanted to microchip you, it could not happen in coming through a needle this small. So this is so helpful and important.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, so, okay, I've got another question. Trenton. So let's say I wanted to put a technology inside of a vaccine and give it to you without you knowing, put it in this tiny needle and inject you. What is the most I could put in your body and it still be invisible to the naked eye? Like, is there any kind of useful technology that you could conceivably hide within a needle that small? Or suspended within a liquid?
I mean, not that I'm aware of, and from what I understand about like possible technologies in the future, I mean, what people are claiming is that it's some kind of like nanobot, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be something that we invent, but we're looking at 50 years from now, 100 years from now. And there's a concept in computers, I hope I don't get this wrong, it's called Moore's Law.
Yeah.
And it's that every 12 to 18 months, computer powers double in speed. However, the caveat to that is we're starting to get limited because we can only make stuff so small, and after a certain point, it physically can't get any smaller, which is why we see stuff with like the new video game consoles. You know, you got these brand new consoles and the graphics are barely any better, and it's because we're kind of approaching that limit. So in order to make something that small, we've got to completely reinvent how computers function. And that's just nowhere near what we're at.
Well, and
by a long shot.
Well, one last thing, then I'll pass you to V. So lastly, logistically, Trenton, if I wanted to track you, would it be easier for me to stealthily hide something and inject it into your body? Or would it be easier for me to track your cell phone?
Cell phone. I mean, that's way easier. I mean, everyone's worried about a microchip, and they're walking around with a phone with them everywhere. So it's I mean, the phone is the way to go. I mean, it has all your information. I mean, that would be the way I would track anything if you were doing something. I mean, it's the perfect way.
Yeah, well,
you can go back to Snowden.
It definitely,
with the stuff that he talked about.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, it definitely leaves a lot to be desired in the idea of, you know, that being the method by which people are going to be tracked. So
right, to me,
like
it's just funny that there's this concept of like, ooh, these super smart, evil, genius, billionaire people who are trying to like track us, but they're like. They have.
Meanwhile, they're sharing the information on Facebook.
Right, exactly.
So Chris in the live chat wanted to clarify and says that we can go smaller, but we can't pipe the heat out anymore. If that's
okay.
I have no idea what that means, but I assume you do, and hopefully people who are watching who are smarter than me will know. But
yeah, this like okay. If we could make Skeptic Generation something where experts in their niche, in their field, just call in to help us debunk stuff, like...
That would be amazing.
I would be very happy with that trend. And Trenton, I think we had an amazing conversation about just that today. So thank you so much for calling in.
No, thanks. I'm glad that it was helpful. I wasn't sure if it was going to be interesting or not, but I was like, I might as well give a call.
Oh, yeah. We are very much interested. So thank you, and feel free to call back.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay, bye.
That was fun.
That was really fun. And wow, our host queue blew up. That is awesome. I have some calls that I think are going to be very fun. Do you have
Even if I don't, I can do it in the meantime.
on the thingy?
I can pop Nathan up and then get him.
Awesome. Nathan.
Get him on there.
All right. Hi, Nathan from Kansas. How are you today?
Hi, guys.
Hi. What can we help you with?
Well, I have a question for you first. I know that you guys both watch Star Trek, correct?
That is correct.
I did not until V, and now I'm caught up, believe it or not.
Yep.
All of the series, all of the everything?
So I have not finished DS9.
And we have not, I will admit, I have not watched Enterprise yet. I keep trying, and that theme song just makes me run away every time. I will power through eventually. But other than that, I think we're almost completely caught up with everything.
Yeah.
New Trek, old Trek.
I encountered something recently that really set my brain on fire, basically, and I'm going to make the same accusation to you guys.
Okay.
Ooh.
You're not real Star Trek fans.
Are we?
Haven't heard that one before.
But are we Scotsmen?
Exactly.
What's going on? Why aren't we?
I was having a conversation with a friend over the new show that you guys probably haven't seen yet, Lower Decks.
Saw the first season.
Yeah, Lower Decks is awesome.
Yeah, don't spoil anything from season 2 yet,
Thank
but
you.
yeah.
I promise I won't spoil anything. That's the worst kind of person. But I was explaining from season 1 the idea that maybe all of Star Trek is this funny, but that the logs and the shows that we've seen in the past is everybody putting their own spin on it. And that Picard is just this silly, and Kirk is just this silly, but they get to write their own logs where they look like professionals.
That's funny.
And my friend was like, "You're not a real Star Trek fan," and so my head exploded. My real question for you guys is, do you see this in other stories, and at what point do stories become so important that we start to, you're not a real fan? You know, I've seen it with Star Wars and other stuff like that too, and I just wanted to kind of explore that general idea of stories becoming more important than they really are.
Yeah, that is Eric's, if you're not watching the video feed, Eric is like, his brain has exploded, essentially.
That's how I've been for a couple of days. I get it, buddy.
I'm plugging everything back in.
It's like,
Yep.
Yeah.
as far as I'm concerned, that is a fascinating topic. The idea that stories can become, well, you kind of have that trajectory, right? Like a story is new and fresh and exciting and, you know, can do anything. And then as soon as it kind of becomes canonized, as soon as it becomes like the way you tell the story, all of a sudden it becomes a lot more rigid and you don't have that flexibility anymore. And so that at that point, I feel like the risk of it becoming toxic in terms of dictating how you should interact with the story rather than organically growing from those interactions is tricky. I think a good example of that is Star Wars, like you were saying. There is this concept of what is really Star Wars and what isn't, and it really feels like, and this happened with Star Trek too. Next Gen was said to be not really Star Trek, you know, until it was old enough to be considered canon. And then all of a sudden, oh no, that's real Star Trek. You know what isn't real Star Trek? DS9. And then as soon as DS9 became popularized and embedded into that kind of restricted canon, they're like, oh no, that's fine. But like new Trek, like Discovery, not real Star Trek. And we know now, right? Like if we give a bird's eye view of it, we just have to wait about 20 years. And then whatever we're doing now with Star Trek will not be real Star Trek, but Discovery, that's OG shit, right? So I think that we see basically what gives fundamentalism its bite happen everywhere. As soon as a bunch of people get invested in a story, it has the potential to become kind of a dogma, kind of this doctrine of it's either this way, which is right, or any other way, which is wrong. And the toxicity for me comes in when the story no longer facilitates connection, but rather division, right? So if we are looking at a story and we know that everybody who engages with it splits off into these factions and just goes to war with each other over it, we might want to revisit, how to engage with that story. Maybe the story itself isn't toxic, but certainly the way it's being used is. And I think that ties directly back into a lot of religion. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that anytime people want to create for themselves this identity around a thing that they love, or a thing that is meaningful to them, oh, well, we do this and we do that, and you start finding all the similarities, and then as soon as somebody doesn't fit the mold, well, that's not one of us.
Yeah.
And these in-group, out-group dynamics is an entirely human thing. It just, yeah.
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
A lot of the same. Most of my conundrum this week has been, am I a Star Trek Mormon, essentially? Like, I keep adapting each new chapter. I took the Old Testament, New Testament. Now there's this whole New Testament of Lord X that has taught me that the true meaning behind everything, and causing much division between me and my friends.
Oh gosh. Well, I think that is something that we could look at as okay, well, we know what happens when a story becomes canonized to the point of becoming the source of the fracturing of the community. How long lasting could a story be if we understood and adapted every time something new came into play, right? I think in one way that might be, it would probably go counter to any actual human nature, but it might be interesting to see how long we could keep a story going if everybody was a little bit more chill about it. Although then the ship of Theseus thing becomes a thing. When does it stop being the story it started out as, and do we care about that?
Well,
I could get so high. I could get so high and talk about this all night. This is awesome.
I would love to just kind of wrap this back really quick for people, just because of that original, not a true blank. Just for people who are watching, who are new to this, who have not heard the no true Scotsman. Is it an informal fallacy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is an informal fallacy that essentially seeks to invalidate someone's argument by invalidating the person, saying they're not one of us. They're not actually in the group, right? So, all Christians are good people. Well, that Christian is a bad person. Well, then they're not a true Christian. It goes back to, it's called No True Scotsman because I know that you describe it better. How was that formulated?
I'm sorry?
How's the no
actual Scotsman? Oh, yeah. So someone says, no true Scotsman puts sugar in his porridge. And then person number two says, my uncle is Scottish and he puts sugar in his porridge, right? Seemingly justifying, that does in fact happen. And the first person goes, well, then he's not a true Scotsman. No true Scotsman puts sugar in his porridge.
It's weird gatekeeping, and instead of helping a conversation, all it does is it's just invalidating for no good reason.
Well, we talked about this with Sky right before, which is, let's just have a little nuance. The only reason a true Scotsman fallacy is necessary in the first place is because you've made that distinction that all something are something. And that's hardly ever the case, right? We can't make that kind of a broad claim. And so the second you introduce nuance, you no longer need to rely on the no true Scotsman fallacy in order to get your point across.
Yeah. And we appreciate that you're bringing it up for Star Trek, because honestly, dude, just because you're a skeptic in 10 areas of your life doesn't mean you're not toxically not skeptical in somewhere in another place. So it's just keeping an eye on it.
Also, I'm just happy to talk about Star Trek at any point in any context. So This was great, Nathan. This was a really interesting idea, and I think that Eric's going to be chewing on that captain's log thing for a little bit, for sure.
Well, enjoy the rest of DS9 and getting caught up with everything else, guys. Have an awesome show. I love you both. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Have a good rest of your day.
Hey, Nathan.
Yep.
Nope.
Dropped off. What were you going to say?
I would hate for Picard to be my captain. Fight me.
Oh, yeah, we've had that conversation before.
That's right. Picard is, yeah. But honestly, that idea kind of is reworking the way I'm thinking about Picard, that he might not be a terrible person. Maybe.
He might not be a terrible person?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so somebody asked me, which Star Trek captain would you least want mad at you? And there were people saying Lorca from Discovery or...
Janeway.
No. Janeway is very easy to push over. Janeway, if you are a member of the crew, she will be mad at you for like 15 minutes and then be fine.
Yeah, if you're a member of the crew, fair.
Right, if you are of the crew and the captain was mad at you. I said Picard because Picard only really gets mad at people if they've actually fucked up. So if Picard was mad at me for real, that meant that I did something bad.
Ooh, didn't DS9 genocide an entire planet?
DS9 did genocide an entire planet.
Okay, so let's go with that.
Well, not the planet, not the people on the planet, but all of the natural resources. They made it uninhabitable. Okay, so...
How is that not the winner? Okay, anyway.
I'm very curious about these next two. You want to talk with Mike?
I really, really do. You got to talk to Mike. I want to talk.
Oh, this is that Mike. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Let's talk with Mike. Mike in Canada. Hello, and welcome to the show again.
Hey, folks.
Hey, Mike.
A little nervous here, but...
No worries. Eric is very excited to talk with you, so I'm going to hand you off to him and let you guys go at it.
So Mike, I've got to be honest. I did not get the chance to hear the call that you were on last. And it looks like you're calling to build on that. So could you kind of set the stage? That way I can pick up with you here.
Well, I didn't actually get on the show.
Got it.
Yeah, and some of what I called about was more personal, so I skipped that.
Okay.
So that, for the purposes of the show. Because I guess my philosophy might be a little more interesting than, my personal journey.
It says that you're a polydeist.
Yeah.
What's that?
To me, it's just a philosophical perspective. It's not a God claim, as Matt Delahunty would probably dismiss as something that's irrelevant to his concern. I would agree. I base most of my philosophy in Stoicism.
Okay.
And which, for me, follows along with what my personal morality is and how I want to be. But I view all beings as equal. So to me, a God...
Can we lift the volume up a little bit?
Oh, that's right. It's a little bit low. Sorry. Mike, you were saying that you view all deities as equal?
All beings.
Okay.
All living creatures.
What about fictitious ones?
Well, that's what I'm trying to explain is I have no problem believing we may encounter a superior extraterrestrial race. I don't necessarily believe it's out there.
We can definitely talk about extraterrestrials, but I'm specifically referencing Voldemort right now.
Okay.
Do you recognize Voldemort as a being?
Sure.
Okay. So it sounds like you have got a real loose definition of being, or at least one that I haven't heard of. So enlighten us, because if we don't understand what you mean by being,
sure.
Yeah, because I don't view Voldemort or other fictitious characters as beings. I would ascribe being to something that exists tangibly in the world, that actually has, a being would be V or myself, but it wouldn't be the butt unicorn that we are selling in our merch store.
I agree with you.
Shout out to the merch store.
Sure.
Go ahead.
What I mean is, I accept you as a being, for example, But with you, I can confirm that. I can communicate. I can investigate, just as any other situation, as I assume you would agree with. But
Okay.
I accept the potential of beings I have not met. I just do not accept them at all as being in any way superior. Because, for example,
I mean, I can take that right off. You don't accept beings that you can't confirm as superior. Fantastic. Why do you accept them at all, though?
well, I accept the potential in the sense that
Okay. Maybe I got us off base here. What is a being? What is being to you?
a being to me is something that is alive.
Okay.
Well, there's a lot of things.
Well,
we could.
fictitious characters aren't alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not saying it well.
Okay.
And again, I make zero God claims or claims about things that cannot be demonstrated.
Then why? Then why are you a polydeist?
Because I accept that tomorrow we can discover a new species of animal.
Mm-hmm.
So I accept that as a potential to be open to that happening. I can accept that tomorrow we may discover life in space. I can accept that as a potential, not any specific claims yet, but I can accept that as potential.
Okay.
The same I could say, and I see a potential God as the same state. I accept it as a potential, but not as any kind of fact or claims specifically, because I'll deal with that with the claims that are presented to me. So I imagine you would.
So what's the use of that? I mean, I'm just trying to think of anywhere where that line of thinking would be helpful. Like we could get hit by a meteor tomorrow, and I can accept that we can be hit by a meteor tomorrow. I'm not going to say it won't happen, but I'm also going to eat my veggies, assuming that I still need to take care of this body. And because of that, I'm not accepting that as a thing that will happen. It's just
Absolutely.
Okay, so
can I jump in with a question real quick? So,
Sure.
Mike, I am not seeing anything that you are saying that I fundamentally disagree with outside of the label itself, if that makes sense. So I also accept the potential that tomorrow everything might change, and I would have to then evaluate that change or that new discovery based on the evidence presented to me. That's kind of the agnostic part of my own belief system, right? So I'm 100% on board with you there for the most part. I think for me, the question is, why take on the term polydeism? Because when I think of polydeism, right, I don't think I've heard that term put together before, but it sounds like what you're saying with that term is that you believe that at one point there were multiple gods and there may or may not still be multiple gods. As deism is essentially the suggestion that, a god or gods used to exist, created everything possibly, and then kind of fucked off. And we don't know if they still exist anymore. I'm just curious about why you're using this term to talk about something that I actually very much agree with, but don't see reflected in the term.
Understood. That's pretty much what you would probably find if you search the term on the internet.
Okay.
It would generally refer to somebody who believes maybe all our groups of gods were participated in creation, perhaps, but then, took off for whatever reason on their own, and therefore left us to be who we are, or something to that effect. My take is different. It's more, the concept of a god, or at least the concepts that have presented to me, is don't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way to relate, it's more of a compassion thing. To me, compassion is the only thing that holds us together, regardless of language or anything else. Compassion is the source of our success, in my opinion. Before we could talk, it was our compassion in our community, our whether it was our our DNA that told us to be social creatures, that compassion is what drives us to even care about what someone else or something else thinks.
I mean, I would agree to an extent that things like mirror neurons exist and help to, biologically connect people and add that kind of empathy to the equation. I'm still just confused about why you are claiming a belief in a thing that you have already said so far doesn't exist. Like, it might exist tomorrow, but right now it doesn't, at least to your knowledge.
Yeah, what makes you different from us?
Yeah.
Well, what am I claiming doesn't exist? I guess.
Well,
I'm
you're
not making a claim.
Yeah, no, you're saying, from my understanding, you're saying all the God claims that you've heard thus far don't make sense. So you don't necessarily believe in those. And there might be gods that you do believe in tomorrow if presented with sufficient evidence. But in this moment, it feels like you're making maybe not a positive claim, but certainly the assumption is that you are not convinced by any existing God claims, and you have not yet heard any God claims that would convince you, although you admit you might one day. So right now, it sounds like you don't believe in any gods. So my question is, why use a theistic label for yourself?
Yeah, it sounds like you're an agnostic atheist.
And you can call me that. Absolutely fine. Again, it's really just a way for me to be able to communicate with other people who aren't of the same mind.
But the thing is, if you're looking for useful communication and you can hear how muddy that definition has made things, I think that that's an impediment to communication and not helping, if that's what your goal is.
Well, I think that the conversation around what you believe and why is always interesting, and I think this was an interesting call. I do also think that if you want, I understand the impetus in not taking on a label that is inflammatory or has been associated with inflammatory people, and you wanting to not associate with that label in order to better further conversations with people who might be put off by it. Absolutely understand that as well. I would suggest rethinking the polydeism thing, just because more often than not, at least in the conversations that I've had with people who, move into the pantheism, polydeism kind of space, it ends up dominating the conversation as opposed to facilitating a larger and better one, right? So instead of us having a really great conversation about how we can know things and the certainty or lack thereof of the future, we've gotten stuck on that label and have tried to dissect it, which, while interesting, maybe wasn't where you wanted to go with this call. So maybe thinking about the term you use to communicate your beliefs with people. But I totally understand the desire to not use specific labels because you think it would hinder conversation.
Okay.
That's, I think, a very good point. And I have a term that I have used, but I thought it would be a little more confusing. But you tell me this. I considered it initially pragmatism, meaning here's the situation. If the God claim is proven to be true, my philosophy still has the same answer for it. So pragmatism was what I kind of thought of. Polydeism kind of explained to people rather quickly maybe how to approach me when I'm discussing it. But
okay, well, I mean, it's kind of a mouthful, but it's actually pretty interesting, and I think it gets rid of the confusion around what polytheism and polydeism might bring to the table. So I'd say workshop it. Try having that conversation with a couple people. We are going to need to move on to the next call, but Mike, this was interesting. I love talking about definitions of things.
Yeah.
That's for it. I'm glad I got a chance to talk to both of you.
Thanks so much, Mike.
To me, and I appreciate your work. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of your day. All right. We are coming up on the end of the last 20 or so minutes.
Holy moly.
I do want to make sure we talk with Salvatore, because Salvatore has been waiting on the line for a little bit. So let's jump on with him. Salvatore in Louisiana. Welcome to the show. Welcome back.
Hey, good morning, y'all. I guess it's afternoon now.
Little bit. You're a little bit low.
There we go.
Okay.
We got it.
Bumped you up? Perfect.
I can speak up.
No.
All right.
No, you're good.
We fixed you on our end.
Okay. Hey guys, so I called. We were talking about atheopaganism or atheopagans about a couple of weeks ago. Oh, and I have another thing to add from a call months ago, but I didn't want to forget that. So what, you thrown out a comment at one point, like kind of playing in the space of reality and unreality, and it was a really interesting comment. I wanted to call and kind of expand on that a little bit.
Sure. Happy to hear I had an interesting comment.
Yeah. So, I see the gods as archetypes. They're not existent outside of that. But when I step into a ritual space, when I step into a space with people for a ritual, we kind of set aside that skepticism, and I interact with the gods as real. And when you talk about playing with reality and unreality, like in the back of my head, I'm like, this is not a god. Mm-hmm. But in this space, in this time, for this period, I will choose to interact that way with them, or with this idea in my head. Does that make sense?
I think it does. I think that's exactly the same thing that we do when we read a fantasy novel or watch the horror movie. It's like, no one's going to come to my door with an axe, but in this moment, I'm invested in this story. Sure, I'll play into that. Yeah. The caveat here, and of course, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Salvatore.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm excited, so I was trying to jump in.
Go for it.
That's a really good point, because fiction teaches truth, but it's not necessarily factual. Making that distinction, and there's important lessons that we learn from fiction about the human condition. So, relating that to a story, that was a connection I hadn't made. My brain was like, "Oh, that's awesome." So anyway, go ahead.
I think Eric's gonna ask a little bit more about fact versus truth. I think he perked up there for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said fiction teaches truth. If you want to break Eric, say fiction teaches truth. But I get the deeper conversation being had here. I would just, as the pedant among other pedants, because I think everyone who watches and enjoys this show is one, I wouldn't say fiction teaches truth. If you want to argue that, I'd be down, but
fiction,
I'd workshop that.
It's catchy. Fiction has the potential to convey true things, even if the situations being portrayed did not factually happen. I think we can all agree on that.
I mean, it's called allegory.
It illuminates something about our... Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go for it.
In my understanding of it, and truth is just a really catchy way to say it, but it reveals something about the human condition. It helps illuminate something about our lives and can help us make positive changes in our lives.
Sure. Yeah. I think those can be summed up as allegory, metaphor, and poetry.
Right. Yeah. And here's the thing. I get it. And I know that there are a lot of hardline atheists who don't feel like that is useful or maybe actively harmful. And in certain contexts, I agree. I think that if that flexibility in that playing in that space of saying, I know this isn't actually true or reflective of reality, but for this moment, because it's going to benefit me and my mental state or this ritual or whatever, I'm going to pretend like it is and really get into that headspace. And for that 15 minutes or hour or 2 hours, this is real. If that's all, that's fine. But I think the problem that could arise from that is then giving that leeway to people who would then use that playing in that space and claiming things are real to do harm, right? So if you say, playing devil's advocate here for a minute, Salvatore, if you say, for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be doing this ritual that speaks to me, makes me feel good, connects me with the people around me. And in those 30 minutes, the gods that I believe in are real because that's helpful. And that is what I've chosen to believe at this time. And then afterwards, I'm going to put that down in the same way I would put down a novel or end a podcast and move on with my life. And then somebody else says, well, I'm also going to pretend for the next 30 minutes that my God is real, but my God allows me to kill you. And so for those 30 minutes, that's okay. Or maybe I'll extend that. Maybe it's for a week, maybe it's the purge situation. At what point do we draw that distinction? And how are we speaking about this in a way that explicitly condemns that second group?
I'd have to argue that it's by not using the words, I accept that this is true even for a small amount of time. Ever, because I don't think you can. I'm sure both you, Salvatore, and V have watched Pixar movies, right? Like, have you seen Toy Story?
Yes, sir.
I didn't need to for the time that movie was playing, except that Buzz and Woody were real in order to connect. Instead, I was able to put myself in the headspace, and that's great, but I wouldn't define that, because, you're riveted. You're watching these movies. It makes you cry, all of that. You're invested in the characters. You can be invested. You can have an emotional response. You can connect. You can, all of those things, and not need to say that you're accepting for any amount of time that it's real. I just would take that language and put it on the shelf and only pull it out when it's needed. I would not play kickball with it when I'm not trying to denigrate, the ritual that you do. Doing that ritual is fantastic. You're enjoying it. That's fantastic. I don't think that you need to accept that it's real. And if you're just invested in that and you're finding yourself getting into it, I don't think that that's accepting it as real. I think that we can just really get into things. I would imagine, what immediately comes to mind is the Assassin's Creed games. Playing Assassin's Creed, and then everywhere I go, I'm just looking for handholds to scale buildings. Like, that's just, the world now is just something to play on. At no point playing it or afterwards did I accept that it was true for it to have an incredible impact on me. It just, I would divorce that language.
What are your thoughts?
And I also want to know what yours are, V. But you first, Salvatore.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm processing right now. My brain is kind of clicking. So over the V, why don't you? I hadn't. V, why don't you go while I process?
Sounds good.
I'm not a professional podcaster to process this quickly.
I'm trying to be a little bit more considerate and letting the callers speak first, because I know we've had some issues in the past just talking over for the whole time. But you take your time. I'll engage with this first, and hopefully that's helpful. So I think ultimately that's, if we're going to talk about this component, I think if we could get everyone else on the same page, it would be helpful, but I don't think that that's a realistic expectation. So the way that we use real is so varied and has so much, it has such a spectrum of what it could mean, that in this argument, to make this philosophical case, premise A, premise B, premise C, if we are using real in this way, we have to use it throughout. Agree with you, 100%. My concern is less about whether or not we could make the case with a specific definition of real and utilize that in that sense, and then use other words for other things that we mean.
Genuine.
My concern is that we cannot expect everybody who engages with the world like Salvatore does to be that particular with their words at all times, to the exclusion of things like, poetic language or evocative language. so that hopefully somebody on the other side of things who would use a similar mindset to do something bad thinks about it and says, well, they didn't say it was real, so I guess that's why I'm not going to engage in this same thought process.
But then it's just using that language to concede to no one for no good reason. I feel like that further now gives no reason why that language should be used.
Well, there's no reason why it should be used. It just is. Like, it's just a brute fact that people are going to use the word real to mean it was really in love with this person, or this really hit me. Didn't really hit you. It's a concept. Concepts can't hit you.
But just in this context, we're talking about ontological.
Right. But and I'm agreeing with you that ontologically, your concern makes sense. And in this isolated space, that is a really good way to distinguish between one worldview and another. My concern, and the concern that I had brought to Salvatore, was in the real world outside of this isolated space, where we're talking about ontology specifically.
People who are following at home, ontology specifically deals with what exists, which makes it separate from things like axiology and epistemology. For more information on that, you can go to V's channel and watch How to Skeptic, that does an incredible breakdown of that. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
It was good.
So, hey guys.
Yeah,
what's up?
Salvatore, your thoughts.
Okay, all right. So the discussion about what is real and what is not, I get that. And again, the language, even in the phone call, is metaphorical and allegorical. Those are good ways to describe it. So,
cool.
In the pagan community, there is this discussion in the wider pagan community about how do you hard polytheism versus soft polytheism versus atheopaganism, and everyone I've talked to about this, they're like, oh yeah, they're familiar with the discussion and the concept. So maybe that's maybe it's just such a niche community that these ideas are easily communicated that way. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. That happens all the time in the atheist community as well.
Okay. We could publish a dictionary.
And so I think it's, when I use those terms, it's like I'm using them like I would around a fire pit or something, and everyone gets it. But I understand, like for you guys, when you hear real, it may have a different connotation. And
so,
I was a little...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when we're used to arguing with people about things that they believe are ontologically real, then it puts you in a headspace. And so when somebody calls in and says, hey, I think that this thing is real, and I'm looking at your description, and I'm atheopaganism, okay. So the paganism is... Okay, but we're talking about what's real. Okay, so is there some kind of woo here? Is there something going on here that might be magical that this person is holding on to?
Life is magical, Eric.
V?
Oh, look, I can do a whole nother phone call about what I think about magic.
Oh, I honestly, Salvatore, I think that we would get along
I'm not hosting.
Great. I think that we honestly would have some really awesome conversations. Here's the deal. I totally get where you're coming from. I absolutely do. I was in that headspace for a very long, long time, and I think that I still kind of am. But I think that the realization that you just had, and that drawing between two different communities using the same word, by the way, exactly what I was saying in the conversation just now, Eric, is that,
and that's what helped. Yeah.
Right, there are different communities use the words differently, and we can't expect them all to use the word the same exact way in order to, use that as our safeguard against concerns. We have to find other things. So I don't know. Salvatore, this was awesome. We're going to need to wrap up and read out the super chats and end out everything. But thank you so much for calling back, and feel free to call in again.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Look, happy birthday. And I wish I had time for my second thing I said at the beginning, but maybe I'll call back about it.
Absolutely do.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Do we have time for Brandon?
I really would like to talk more to Brandon than the 2 minutes that we've got will allow.
Oh, yeah.
Because we do have an after show on Discord after this. So Brandon, If you're listening to us now, we would love to talk with you. Please either call back early next week. This happens a lot where the first half we'll have maybe 3 or 4 callers, and then that second half everyone calls in. If you call in a little earlier, we absolutely will be able to get to you.
Yeah.
Or you can jump into the Discord, tiny.cc/SG Discord, and we can talk to you there.
Like specifically for Brandon, it is a religious caller who we had an ongoing conversation with on the last show that we did before SkepGen, and they want to talk about a subject that is juicy and fun, that I think we can banter a lot, but when you call towards the end...
Yeah, it becomes a little bit more fast-paced, and we don't want to have to do that.
No.
So, Brandon, we're going to let you go for this week, but absolutely call us back and call back earlier so that we can make sure to get deep into this topic with you.
Okay, then I'm going to drop him.
All right. We are pretty much done for the day, except for reading out some amazing super chats that we've got. Let's start with Nytheria Fade, $9, and they say happy birthday.
Yeah, well, your birthday is tomorrow, so if you are following V on social media, make sure that you shout out to them at Author Confusion, or if you want to find them on Facebook, or even on Instagram. You're on Instagram a little bit.
I am on Instagram, yes.
Reach out, wish them a happy birthday, and embarrass them terribly, because V and I had to travel, and we need to quarantine a bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what to do tomorrow that doesn't cost any money because we spent a lot this week and also doesn't involve anybody else because we're going to be quarantining a little bit.
So send me some love.
Yeah.
Next, we have Chimp3, who says, I've been a nurse for 30 years. I work in a facility with a COVID-19 unit, get vaccinated in 16 months, over 40 deaths from COVID, 0 from the flu. Read that one out earlier. Yep.
Jonathan Fuller, $5, says Eric might not get a party invite when I get my doctorate in business. I think that's because you knocked on accountants for a minute there.
Oh, I'm sorry, but most accountants I know when I could not pick a subject I was passionate about in college, and so I went with one that I knew was going to give me a lifestyle that I wanted to live. Fair. I'm still rooting for you, and if you remember the second part of what I said, it was, I'm glad people like you exist in this world, because that ain't me.
All right, you go.
Oh, Blazing Wizard Pope says, I saw the math cult as being good evidence that even the smartest people of their time can believe incredibly stupid stuff.
That's a good point.
Yep.
Absolutely. What you believe does not reflect on your IQ and vice versa. Holly K, $20. Thank you, Holly. Says, happy birthday, V. I've been watching SG since the beginning and love y'all's show.
Yay!
Yay!
And we are constantly working at getting better. If you are watching today and you go back, you'll see that the lower scroll
it doesn't stop midway. It's great.
And we're actively trying to keep the volume levels good. We're just doing everything we can a bit at a time to make this as good as possible.
Absolutely.
Student Dr. Ben, well, you can read Ben's.
Ben gave us $10, says, thank you for taking my call. Here's a birthday gift from me. Please enjoy a few Red Bulls. And Eric, please wear the mustache suit we showed you on Neil's stream. It would be great for your wedding.
So I was settling in for the day, and I saw that Neil the 604 Atheist was doing a stream, and there were some really cool people on there. Ben was in there, and they were looking at a suit. It was a white suit that had a whole bunch of mustaches on it. I'm good. It's not necessarily my style. Al the Atheist says, happy birthday, V. Congrats to you both again. Nauseatingly adorable people. Lobbying for you guys to wear costumes the 31st of October episode. Are we doing an episode on Halloween?
That would be amazing if we are. I'm going to double check.
Yeah, Lord of the Ring and Star Trek are definitely options, but matching butt unicorns, just saying.
We are indeed doing one on Halloween.
Okay, so I'm going to have to. I
already have my costume.
Can I fall back on the Jon Snow? I've done the Jon Snow for years.
You've done the Jon Snow a couple of times. You're going to feel very bad when my costume is awesome and you've just worn a cape.
Okay, so I'm going to crowdsource this, guys. Help me come up with ideas. Put it in the comments. I would love for your suggestions about what kind of Halloween costume, because I can't think of any right now.
All right, Mark Bell says, happy birthday, V. Thanks so much to both of you for a great show. All the best.
And then Rodrigo says, yay, happy birthday, V. You both are doing such a great job with the show.
Aw, thank you everybody for showing up today and for giving us a little bit of your time this Sunday. I'm so excited for everything that's coming. We are planning our new set that is in the works. If you are interested in helping us raise money for that set, for getting this ready to go even better than it already is, here are some links for you to donate to our Patreon or to our Amazon wish list, which is going to help us get that.
Yeah, I've been working on what we're going to need for this set specifically.
Yeah.
And I realized that we've got the lights for this static set, but we're going to need to be mounting lights for a larger situation that we've got going on. So I've actually been adding things to that Amazon wish list, including studio lights. And so if people did want to contribute that way, that's a great way to do it.
Okay, sounds good. In the meantime, we are going to hop over to the Discord and have a little bit of an after show. So that's tiny.cc/SG Discord if you want to join us there. And in the meantime, Eric, what's our sign off for this week?
Knowledge is, just remember that knowledge is power, and power corrupts.
That seems counterintuitive.